My brother Derek was the golden child, but his cruel jab at his graduation dinner shattered me. I stopped funding his life, sparking a family showdown. Can we rebuild after years of entitlement? Watch my journey of reclaiming self worth in this raw, emotional story. I've always been the quiet one in my family, the one who worked hard and stayed out of the spotlight. My name's Lisa, I'm 29, and I'm a graphic designer in Austin, Texas. I built my career from scratch, working 2 jobs through college to pay for my degree, while my younger brother, Derek, sailed through life as the golden child. He was the one with straight A's, varsity soccer trophies, and a charm that made everyone, teachers, coaches, our parents, fall in love with him. Growing up, I was proud of him, even if I sometimes felt like I was living in his shadow. My parents always said he was going places, and I believed it too. But somewhere along the way, I became less his sister and more his personal ATM. And it wasn't until his college graduation last spring that I realized how much I'd let that define me. It started when Derek was in high school. He got a full-ride scholarship to UT Austin, which was a big deal in our family. My parents, who live in a modest house in Round Rock, were over the moon, throwing a huge party when he got accepted. I was 25 then, just starting to make a name for myself in the design world, freelancing for startups and scraping by. My parents called me one evening, their voices gentle but firm. "Lisa, Derek's scholarship covers tuition, but not the extras. Textbooks, dorm supplies, his meal plan. Can you help out just for a bit?" I didn't have much, but I said yes. I started sending $300 a month, cutting back on my own expenses to make it work. Derek would text me every now and then, usually to ask for more. "Hey, can you Venmo me $50 for a new backpack?" Or, "I need $100 for this class trip." Never a thank you, just a quick cool when the money hit his account. I figured he'd appreciate it later, when he was older. Spoiler, he didn't. Fast forward to last spring, Derek's senior year at UT. He was graduating with a finance degree, already had a job lined up at a big firm in Dallas, and my parents were acting like he'd won the Nobel Prize. I was excited for him too. I decided to fly down to Austin for the ceremony, renting a small Airbnb near campus to make it a special weekend. I'd saved up for months to buy him a graduation gift, a custom leather portfolio embossed with his initials from a local Austin artisan. It cost $600, a big splurge for me, but I thought it was perfect for his new job. I imagined him using it in boardrooms, maybe even thinking of me when he did. I wrapped it carefully, picturing his face when he opened it. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. The sun was shining, the UT Tower was glowing orange, and thousands of families packed the stadium. I sat with my parents, clapping as Derek walked across the stage, his grin wide enough to light up the whole place. Afterward, we all met up at a trendy barbecue joint on South Congress for a family dinner. Me, Derek, my parents, and a few of his friends. The place was packed, the air thick with the smell of smoked brisket and cornbread. I was in a great mood, passing around plates, joking with Derek's buddies about their college stories. When the food settled, I handed Derek the gift, wrapped in tissue paper, my heart racing with anticipation. He opened it, glanced at the portfolio, and set it aside. "Oh, cool," he said, his voice flat. "I thought you'd get me something I could actually use, like cash for my apartment deposit." My stomach dropped. The table laughed like it was just Derek being his charming, cheeky self. My mom said, "Oh, honey, he's just joking." And my dad chuckled, patting Derek's shoulder, but I saw his face. He wasn't joking. He meant it. His friends moved on to another conversation, and my parents started talking about the ceremony, but I couldn't hear them over the ringing in my ears. I'd spent months choosing that gift, pouring my heart into it, and he tossed it aside like it was nothing. I forced a smile through the rest of dinner, but inside I was unraveling. That night in my Airbnb, I lay awake, replaying every time I'd sent Derek money, every time I'd skipped a night out with friends to cover his extras. I thought about the $300 a month I'd been sending for 4 years, $14,400 total, not counting the random Venmo requests. I realized he didn't see me as his sister. Not really. I was just the person who paid for things. The next morning, I logged into my bank account and canceled the final $300 transfer I'd promised for his post-graduation expenses. No warning, no text. I just did it. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I'd finally taken a breath after holding it for years. I knew Derek would notice eventually, and I braced myself for the fallout. He'd always been good at getting what he wanted, and I was sure he'd come at me with charm or guilt, whatever worked. But I was done being the supporting character in his story. This time, I was writing my own. 2 days after Derek's graduation dinner, where he dismissed my $600 leather portfolio like it was a dollar store trinket, my phone buzzed. I was in my Austin apartment, sprawled on the couch, trying to focus on a freelance design project, but still stinking from his words. The text was from Derek. "Yo, the payment didn't go through. Can you fix it? Need it for my apartment deposit." I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to type out a long explanation to tell him how his casual cruelty at the barbecue joint had gutted me, how I'd spent years funneling money his way, $14,400 over 4 years, not counting the random Venmo requests for concert tickets or gas. But I didn't. I left the message unread, set my phone face down, and went back to my laptop, my hands shaking a little. I'd canceled that final $300 transfer the morning after the dinner, and I wasn't going back. The next day, he called. I was sipping coffee at a cafe on East 6th, sketching a logo for a new client, when his name lit up my screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lisa, what's up?" he said, his voice edged with annoyance. "I need that $300 or I'm going to lose this apartment in Dallas. It's not a big deal. Just send it." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm done, Derek," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I gave you a gift, poured my heart into it, and you threw it in my face. I'm not funding you anymore." He laughed, sharp and disbelieving, like I was pulling a prank. "You're seriously mad about the portfolio thing? It was a joke. Come on, don't be like that." I could hear the smirk in his voice, the same one he had at dinner when his friends laughed and my parents brushed it off. I hung up without another word, my heart pounding. For the first time, I didn't care if he thought I was overreacting. By the next morning, my mom was on the phone. I was in my kitchen, slicing an apple for breakfast, when her call came through. "Lisa, what's going on?" she said, her voice soft but urgent. "Derek says you canceled his payment. He's stressed about moving to Dallas for his job." I put the knife down, leaning against the counter. I told her everything. How I'd been sending $300 a month since he started college. How I'd skipped nights out, new clothes, even a vacation to cover his textbooks, meal plans, and random extras. I told her about the graduation dinner, how Derek dismissed my gift, how his friends laughed, and how she and Dad acted like it was no big deal. "He didn't just hurt my feelings, Mom. He acted like I owe him, like my money's his to take, and you all let him." There was a long pause, the kind that feels like it's holding years of unsaid things. "He's just young, honey. He doesn't mean it." That lit a fire in me. Young? Mom, he's 22. He's got a six-figure job waiting. He's not a kid. He's entitled, and you've all let him be. She didn't argue, just sighed, heavy and tired. She said she'll talk to him before hanging up. I didn't believe her. She'd always had a soft spot for Derek, her golden boy. A week later, Derek texted again, his tone less cocky. Lisa, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Can we talk? I really need that money. I ignored it, focusing instead on a new client pitch, a mural project for a coffee shop downtown. I was done explaining myself, done being the reliable sister who always caved. But the silence didn't last. My dad called that evening, his voice gruff, the way it gets when he's trying to fix things. Lisa, you're being petty. It was one comment. He's your brother, and he's got a lot on his plate with this move. I laughed, bitter, surprising myself. One comment. Dad, I've sent him over $14,000 since he was 18. Textbooks, dorm stuff, trips, $300 a month, plus extra whenever he asked. Never a thank you, just more demands. I'm done. There was a long silence. I didn't know it was that much, he said, his voice softer. Let's talk this out in person. Come to the house Sunday. I showed up at my parents' house in Round Rock, my stomach twisted in knots. The drive from Austin felt longer than usual, the familiar strip malls and oak trees blurring past as I rehearsed what I'd say. Derek was already there, slouched on the living room couch, his phone in hand, but his eyes on the floor. My parents sat across from us, Mom in her favorite armchair, fidgeting with her coffee mug, Dad on the edge of the recliner, his arms crossed. I didn't wait for them to start. I'm not here to argue, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. I've been sending Derek money for 4 years. I gave him a thoughtful gift, something I saved for months to buy, and he acted like it was trash. You all laughed like it was fine. I'm not a bank. I'm your daughter, your sister, and I deserve better. Derek rolled his eyes, but it was half-hearted. It was a joke, Lisa. You're blowing this out of proportion. My dad cut in before I could respond. Derek, stop, he said, his voice sharp. She's right. You've been taking her for granted. I froze. My dad never took sides, always played the neutral peacemaker. He turned to me. We didn't know how much you were giving him. We should have paid attention. My mom nodded, tears welling up. We thought you wanted to help, she said. I laughed, again, softer this time. I did, but I didn't sign up to be used. Derek didn't say much after that. He mumbled an apology, but it felt forced, like he was just trying to smooth things over. I left the house feeling lighter, but not resolved. The family group chat went silent. No updates about Derek's new job, no pictures of Mom's garden or Dad's golf outings. I knew they were processing, maybe even embarrassed, but I wasn't sure they'd change. I threw myself into my work, landing a big contract with a tech startup and signing up for a pottery class I'd always wanted to try. For the first time, I wasn't worrying about Derek's next request. I was building my own life, and it felt good. But I also knew this wasn't over. Derek wasn't one to let things go, and my parents hated conflict. I braced myself for whatever came next, ready to hold my ground. A month had passed since the tense family meeting at my parents' house in Round Rock, and I hadn't heard a word from Derek. I was back in my Austin apartment, throwing myself into work, trying to shake the hurt that still lingered from his dismissal of my $600 graduation gift and the years I'd spent sending him $300 a month, $14,400 total, not counting the random Venmo requests for pizza or gas. My mom called a few times, giving me snippets of Derek's life. He'd moved to Dallas, started his finance job, rented a small apartment with a roommate. He's figuring things out, she'd say, her voice hopeful but vague. I didn't ask for details. I was too busy landing a big contract with a tech startup, designing their branding from scratch. And it felt good to focus on something that was mine. But deep down, I couldn't shake the ache. Not just from the money, but from the way my family had let Derek's entitlement slide for years. It wasn't about the dollars. It was about being seen, really seen, as more than a resource. One Saturday afternoon, I was at my desk, tweaking a logo with the Austin skyline glowing through my window, when there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I figured it was a delivery guy with the wrong address. I opened the door, and there was Derek, standing on my doorstep, holding a small cardboard box. He looked different, nervous, his usual cocky grin gone, his hands fidgeting with the box's edges. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice low, almost unsure. I nodded, wary, and let him in. He sat on my couch, the box in his lap, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The hum of the AC filled the silence, and I braced myself for another half-hearted excuse, or worse, another request for money. "He messed up, Lisa," he said finally, looking at the floor. "I'm sorry. Not just for the graduation thing, but for everything. I didn't realize how much you did for me." I waited, my arms crossed, expecting a catch. I'd heard apologies from him before, usually followed by a "but" or a plea for cash. But he kept going, his voice steady but raw. "I was a jerk. I took you for granted, and I don't know how to fix it. I've been thinking about it a lot since you stopped the payments." He handed me the box, his hands shaking slightly. I opened it, and inside was a framed photo of us as kids, me at 10, him at 6, grinning ear to ear at a water park in San Antonio, our hair wet and our faces sunburned. "He found this in Mom's garage," he said. "I remember you always had my back, sneaking me extra ice cream, covering for me when I broke Dad's golf clubs. I didn't have yours." I stared at the photo, my throat tight. Part of me wanted to hug him, to say it was okay, but another part was still angry, still guarding my heart from more disappointment. "I appreciate the apology," I said, my voice even, "but it's going to take more than words, Derek. You made me feel invisible." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "He wanted to pay you back. Not all at once, but little by little, maybe $100 a month. I'm making decent money now." I didn't commit to anything, just said, "I'll think about it." He didn't push, just thanked me for listening and left, the photo still on my coffee table. A reminder of a time when we were just kids, not this tangled mess of resentment and obligation. After he left, I called my mom, half expecting her to take credit for his visit. "Did you put him up to this?" I asked, stirring sugar into my coffee. She laughed, a little surprised. "No, but I told him he needed to make things right. He's been talking about you a lot, Lisa." She said Derek had been asking about me, how I was doing, what my life was like, whether I was happy. It was strange hearing that he cared. For years, his texts were transactional, only popping up when he needed something. I didn't know if I could trust this new version of him, but a small part of me wanted to believe he was trying. A few weeks later, my parents invited me to dinner at their house. Derek was in town for the weekend, and I almost said no, still raw from the past, but I went, driving the familiar route from Austin to Round Rock, the oak trees and strip malls blurring past, as I rehearsed what I'd say if he slipped back into his old ways. When I walked into the living room, Derek was there, helping my mom set the table, something I'd never seen him do. It was awkward at first, everyone tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. But over dinner, grilled chicken and cornbread, Mom's specialty, Derek started talking about his job, how he was learning to budget, how he realized how much he'd leaned on me. "I didn't get it before," he said, looking at me across the table. "I thought you were just there, always helping. I'm trying to be better." My dad raised an eyebrow, like he was waiting for Derek to backtrack, but he didn't. My mom smiled, her eyes hopeful, and I felt a flicker of something. Maybe not forgiveness, but possibility. Things weren't perfect. Derek sent me $100 the next month, like he promised, with a simple Venmo note first payment. I didn't expect him to keep it up, but I tucked the money away, not ready to let my guard down. I started noticing small changes, though. He texted me a photo of him using the leather portfolio at a work meeting, captioned, "Actually pretty useful, thanks." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something, a crack in the wall we'd built. My parents were trying too. Mom asked about my latest design project, not just Derek's job. Dad called to talk about my upcoming trip to Colorado, not to lecture me about family duty. It was like they'd finally noticed I was their daughter too, not just Derek's support system. I wasn't ready to trust it fully. Years of being the invisible sister don't vanish overnight. But sitting in my apartment, the Austin skyline glittering outside, I felt a shift. I was starting to see myself as more than the reliable one, the one who always said yes. I was Lisa, with my own dreams, my own life. And maybe my family was starting to see that too. 6 months after Derek's unexpected apology, things were different. Not perfect, not the warm, fuzzy family I dreamed of as a kid, but different in a way that felt real. He kept sending the $100 payments every month, no reminders needed, each one landing in my Venmo with a simple note, "For you." At first, I'd expected him to flake, to slip back into the golden boy who took me for granted, but he didn't. He'd text me randomly, a meme about a bad logo design, a question about my latest freelance project, even a photo of Austin's Zilker Park from a weekend visit. It wasn't like we were suddenly inseparable, but it felt like we were rebuilding something, piece by piece, like siblings who'd lost their way but still remembered the path. My parents were changing too. Mom invited me to a pottery class at a studio downtown, just the two of us, laughing as we shaped lumpy clay bowls under the hum of ceiling fans. Dad started calling just to talk about my work, my plans, even the new taco truck I'd found on East 6th, not to play referee in family drama. It was slow, messy progress, but it was progress. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged in my own family, not just as the one who fixed things. Then came Derek's 23rd birthday in August. My parents wanted to throw a small party at their house in Round Rock, a low-key barbecue with burgers sizzling on the grill and lemonade sweating in pitchers. I debated going, my stomach twisting at the thought of being in a room with Derek, half expecting another careless jab to remind me of the graduation dinner when he dismissed my $600 leather portfolio like it was worthless. But I went, partly because I was curious, partly because I wanted to believe he'd changed. I brought a simple gift, a coffee mug with the UT Longhorns logo, picked up from a campus bookstore for $15. Nothing fancy, nothing like the portfolio, but something I knew he'd use. At the party, Derek was quieter than the larger-than-life golden boy I remembered, no longer commanding the room with his charm. He thanked me for the mug, his voice soft, genuine, and later pulled me aside in the backyard where fireflies blinked in the warm Texas dusk. "I'm trying to be someone you're proud of, Lisa," he said, kicking at the grass. "I know I've got a long way to go." I didn't know what to say. Forgiveness wasn't easy after years of feeling invisible, but his eyes were honest, not performative. I nodded and said, "I see you trying. That's a start." For the first time, I believed he meant it, and it stirred something in me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in years. My parents saw it too. Over coffee the next morning, Mom told me Derek had started volunteering with the youth soccer program in Dallas, coaching kids who reminded him of himself, talented but cocky, needing someone to ground them. "He talks about you, Lisa," she said, stirring cream into her mug. "He says he didn't realize how much you gave up for him." Dad, who's never been for big emotions, chimed in later, his voice gruff. "I overheard him on the phone with a friend saying he messed up with you and wants to make it right. I should have stepped in sooner, Lisa. I'm sorry." Coming from Dad, that was seismic. I hugged him, something we hadn't done since I was a kid, and drove back to Austin with the lightness I hadn't expected. The hill country rolling past my car windows like a promise of something new. But it wasn't a Hallmark movie ending. there were still rough patches. At the birthday party, Derek asked, almost too casually, if I'd be at Thanksgiving, and I said, maybe, my voice sharper than I meant. I wasn't ready to dive back into big family gatherings, not after the way his words at the graduation dinner had cut me open, exposing years of being taken for granted. I needed time, and I was learning to give myself that without guilt. When Thanksgiving arrived, I made a choice that surprised even me. I didn't want the usual chaos at my parents' house, neighbors dropping by, cousins arguing over football, too many expectations. So I invited just Mom, Dad, and Derek to my apartment for a small dinner. No grand production, no pressure to perform. I cooked a simple meal, roast chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes with too much butter, and green beans that were slightly overdone but still good. Derek showed up with a pecan pie, store-bought from a grocery store in Guadalupe, still in its plastic case, but a thoughtful gesture. We sat around my tiny dining table, the Austin skyline twinkling through the window, and talked, really talked, about my latest mural project for a coffee shop, Derek's first big presentation at his finance job, our parents' dream of buying a camper to travel the Southwest. No one brought up the money, the portfolio, or the years I'd spent funding Derek's life. It wasn't perfect. There were still pauses, moments where we all felt the weight of the past, but it was honest, and that was enough. Looking back, I see that canceling those payments was about more than the $14,400 I'd sent Derek over the years. It was about forcing my family to see me, not as a wallet or the reliable sister who always said yes, but as Lisa, with my own dreams, my own life. Derek's not perfect. Sometimes I catch a hint of his old arrogance in a text, a too confident joke that makes me brace for disappointment. My parents aren't perfect either. They still light up a little brighter when Derek talks, but they're catching themselves, asking about my world too. And me? I'm learning to let them try, to let them stumble without rushing to fix it. I don't know if we'll ever be the family I pictured as a kid, splashing in water parks and sharing secrets over late-night ice cream, but we're building something new, something grounded in respect, not obligation. Derek's payments keep coming. And last week, he texted me a photo of the portfolio on his desk at work, captioned, "Still using it." It wasn't much, but it was everything. As I sit in my apartment now, the city lights casting shadows on my walls, I feel a quiet strength. I'm not just Derek's sister anymore. I'm Lisa, a designer, a dreamer, a woman who's learned to say no and mean it. That's my ending, not a fairy tale, but a real one. And it's enough.